Hello, everyone. Welcome. I promised that last Sunday that I would do a midweek fireside, and here it is. It's as close to midweek as I can make it work. Just by way of explanation to those of you that are watching, I have been traveling a great deal. A lot of things have been going on in my life. It's been very busy, very happy, a lot of fun, but I've been on the fly a lot. So it's been at times almost impossible to record a fireside. But I will repent. I will do a little bit better. Tonight is a fireside of some of it is brand new material that you've never seen before. So I hope this goes well. And I ask for your faith and prayers. Just by way of information, again, I will be on the road tomorrow. I'm flying to Philadelphia in the morning to meet another group, and we're going to do a church history trip that goes from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And we start one whole day with American history right there in Philadelphia, the founding of America, the story of the Constitution, the story of the Declaration of Independence, and other things as well. And I love that portion of the trip. That is so much fun and so inspiring. Anyway, that trip will start tomorrow morning. We'll go from Philadelphia and we'll wind up in Carthage, Illinois by the time we're done 2 weeks later. So I'll be coming to you for the next fireside from out there somewhere, not sure where. So, but next year, we're going to do a couple more of those Fun for Less church history trips. And they are the complete Chapter 1, Founding of America. If you would like to come, please contact funforlesstours.com or give them a call there in Draper, Utah. And I would love to have you go with me next year for the trip like that. And then also to make mention, check your calendar. I know that a great number of you are regular temple goers. Bless your heart. You're covenant-keeping saints. Well, we've put together something of a rare opportunity. On July 17th, Dennis Lyman and I will be taking a bus tour group in what we're calling the Pioneer Temples of Utah trip. We will do the first session in Logan. We'll then move our way to Manti and finally St. George. In each of these temples and along the way, not only will we do the session, but we'll learn the fascinating history of each of those temples, the stories of how it came to be. Dennis did a documentary, a full-length documentary on each of those temples, so he knows about the construction and the stories and drama of their building. And I will be telling stories about the people, stories, inspirational stories about the temple itself. It's going to be 3 days of temple sessions and of stories from our pioneer past. So again, that goes July 17th to 19th, and we will do Logan, Manti, and St. George, and all the histories and stories of each of those temples. If you would like to come, it's not just a little over a month away. If you'd like to go with us, why contact TetonStagelines.com out of Idaho or call Dennis at 801-541-9760. Again, that's Dennis at 801-541-9760. All right, guys, let's get started for tonight. I ask for your faith and prayers as we go along. Coming up in our Come Follow Me study, we'll be doing section 58. In fact, some of you are probably there now. And one of those verses is where the Lord commands his people. In fact, it's one of our favorite memorized verses, wherein the Lord says that he commands us to be anxiously engaged in a good cause. In fact, the rest of the verse, for behold, he said, it is not meet that I should command in all things. For he that is compelled in all things, the same is a slothful and not a wise servant. Wherefore, he receiveth no reward. Remember that? Section 58, verses 25 and 26. Be anxiously engaged and don't be slothful. slothful, full of sloth. The sloth. Why did the Lord describe those who are slow to obey and spiritually lethargic as slothful? Well, every time I go to Costa Rica, which I will again this next winter of 2026, I am fascinated by sloths. This is what I learned about actual sloths. First, there are three-toed sloths and there are two-toed sloths, and Costa Rica has both of them. Two toes are nocturnal, and the other one is not. Sloths today are about the size of a medium-sized dog, although the prehistoric sloths were as big as an elephant. Sloths also have 46 ribs, more than any other mammal, which serves to support their oversized stomachs. Sloths eat mostly tree material. They have a multi-compartment stomach. Digestion is very slow, up to a month to digest a single leaf. And then, not that I suppose this is relevant, but sloths have very strange bathroom habits. They generally relieve themselves only once a week and can lose up to 1/3 of their body weight in a single go. Evidently, the two-toed sloth will let go up in a tree, look out below, but the three-toed sloth comes down to the ground, does this puzzling potty dance at the base of the tree before he lets go. Scientists are still not sure why they do this. Also, sloths are great swimmers. They can move faster through water than on land. They can also hold their breath up to 40 minutes and suppress their heart rate to about 1/3 its normal rate. Sloths also have 2 extra vertebrae at the base of their neck, which allows them a 270-degree sight axis. Wouldn't that be nice? This helps them a great deal. Sloths are also colorblind. They see poorly in low light and are blind in bright light. They make up for it, however, with a keen sense of smell and a great spatial memory. Do sloths ever fall out of the tree? Well, yes, actually, quite often. They can fall up to 100 feet out of a tree and not be injured. In fact, the aim of males fighting for females is to knock their opponent out of the tree. That's the whole idea. Now, here we go. Sloths are infamously slow, sluggish. Their reaction time is about 1/4 of a human. They will generally travel only about 125 feet max in a day, and on land, they crawl about 1 foot per minute. You have to stare very carefully at a sloth up in a tree to see if it's actually moving and alive. Sloths have less than 30% muscle mass than similar-sized mammals, but they are the undisputed pull-up champs. From the moment they are born, a sloth can lift its entire body upward with just one arm. They have been estimated to be 3 times stronger than humans. Their tendons and muscles give them amazing strength in the trees, such that even predators can't rip them off the tree. Sloths, here you go, especially in captivity, can sleep up to 20 hours a day. In the wild, they will sleep 8 to 9 hours. When they sleep, tendons lock in their hands and feet that keep them in place without expending any energy. They have even been observed hanging in the trees, dead. Sloth fur is unique. It's hollow and it traps water. Now, because sloths are overly sedentary and their hollow fur allows algae and fungi to grow in their fur, which provides camouflage for the sloth as well as extra food. In addition, it has been demonstrated that moths and beetles will oftentimes take up residence in sloth fur because they move so slow. Sloths have very low body temperature. 86 to 93 degrees, in fact, and they regulate their body temperature by moving in and out of the shade of trees. Sloths never work up a sweat. I mean, never work up a sweat. If their core drops too low, the microbes in their stomach stop digesting their food. So they have to keep body temperature regulated by slowly moving in and out of the sunlight. They have to stay just right, or they can die with a full stomach. Sloths will spend 90% of their time just hanging around, upside down, looking around slowly. This is possible, this hanging upside down, because the organs in their body are attached to the rib cage. They don't compress, which keeps them from weighting down their lungs. They are literally the animal that is just hanging around, doing nothing, whose whole ambition in a day is just to fill his belly and take it easy. Now, there you go. When the Lord said, be anxiously engaged and don't be slothful, what do you think he wanted us to learn from the creation of the sloth? Next story. It was the fall of 1826 when Mother Polly Peck Knight and her family first met Joseph Smith Jr. He was struggling at that time to survive, working for wages. He had received the gold plates. He was preparing to receive the gold plates in the fall of 26. The Knights were well-established landowners and farmers. I'll be at their home in just a few days. The Knights would wind up befriending Joseph and help support him while he helped translate the Book of Mormon. They were there on April 6, 1830, when the church was organized in Fayette, New York. On June 28, 1830, Mother Polly Peck Knight was baptized along with others of her family. Her large extended family became the first branch in this dispensation of the new Church of Christ. And because of their numbers and neighbors, they drew intense persecution, more so perhaps than any other group in that period of church history. It was difficult for them, and Joseph spent considerable time among them, teaching and ministering. Then in December 1830, there came a startling revelation. The church was to assemble together at the Ohio. In other words, the entire church was moving. A succeeding revelation declared, they that have farms that cannot be sold, let them be rented, left, or rented as seemeth them good. That's the Knight family. Well-established farmers and landowners. Nonetheless, obedient to that revelation, the farm that they had lived on now for decades was left behind. Part of it was never sold. They just left for Ohio. Now that's faith. They arrived in Ohio in May 1831, and after consecrating all that they owned to the bishop, they were given land to begin anew on the farm of Lehman Copley in Thompson, Ohio. They went to work with vigor, plowing, planting, fencing, and building homes. And then, 3 weeks later, Copley became disaffected and angry and ordered them via the sheriff off his land. Once again, Polly and her family were on the move. They were homeless. Then came another revelation commanding them to be the first to go to, gather to, and learn the location of the modern-day Zion in Missouri. They left. And on July 25th, 1831, the Colesville Saints arrived in Independence, Missouri, the location of Zion. Now, Mother Knight was not well on that trip. In fact, she had grown weaker and weaker as they journeyed. At one point, Newell, her son, got off the boat they were on to buy some wood to build a coffin for her. Yet Mother Knight, determined to reach Zion, hung on and prayed that she would make it. And she did. And she was there and able to participate in both the foundation, in laying the foundation of Zion and in the dedication of the land and its temple. However, no sooner was that completed than on August 6th, 1831, Mother Polly Peck Knight, quote, quietly fell asleep, rejoicing in the everlasting gospel and praising God that she was able to see the land of Zion, end of quote. Her greatest heart's desire was fulfilled. It was the day after her death that the Lord revealed to the prophet Joseph these words, quote, those that live shall inherit the earth, and those that die, speaking of Zion, shall rest from all their labors in the mansions of my Father, which I prepared for them. Section 59, verse 2. Obviously, it's the next day the Lord is making reference to the death of faithful Polly Knight. Mother Polly Peck Knight gave her all in faith. Mother Polly Peck Knight gave her all in faith and journeyed 1,300 miles to gather with the saints and reached what would be the saints' promised land. Interestingly, her journey, 1,300 miles, that same distance later that tens of thousands of saints would journey from Nauvoo and other points west to the Salt Lake Valley. She's buried in Kaw Township in Missouri. There she lies, a worthy member asleep in Jesus until the resurrection, end of quote. She died just on the west side of the Big Blue River, west of Independence, Missouri, becoming, as it were, the matriarch of the great gathering, the first of thousands to sacrifice all and die on the journey to Zion. Honor and glory be to her and all those who followed and will yet follow her example and gather with the saints to Zion in her stakes. Next story. In August, I am going to British Isles for a month. And one of the places we're going to go, Conwy, or Conway, as some people like to say it. When you visit the castle and town of Conwy in Wales, you might hear this following story. I share it not because the story is true in every detail, but because it speaks out of the dust, a parable from the past, from Wales. Long ago in the days when the hills still whispered the names of the old Celtic gods, a quiet monk named Brother Madog lived beside the river Conwy. He belonged to the last generation of Cistercian brothers who remained in the area after the great Aberconwy Abbey was dismantled and its brethren moved inland. While most of the monks obeyed the king's command to leave, Madog refused. He wasn't defiant, just deeply rooted. He had tended the abbey's garden, cared for the sick, and memorized the stars from the river's reflection. He had taken a vow not just of poverty, but of place. With the abbey gone, he built a small hermitage of driftwood, stone, and moss at a bend in the river, where the tide met the fresh water. He lived simply, growing herbs, brewing healing teas, and fishing when he needed to eat. Locals said he could coax fish from the river by singing songs in Welsh. Well, one year the winter came early and fiercely. The river froze, snow blanketed the hills, and game fled deeper into the forests. Crops failed. The people in Conwy grew desperate. Madog's stores, though small, he gave freely. Dried vegetables, smoked fish, and bitterroot. But soon Madog had nothing left. In a final act of hope, he knelt by the frozen river at dawn. The ice beneath him was like glass. He whispered, O Lord of sea and sky, I do not ask for myself, but for the children who cry and the mothers who hunger. As his breath turned to steam in the morning air, the ice cracked with a clear, ringing sound, not violently, but like the note of a bell. A circle of water opened up, and from its depth arose a great silver salmon, glimmering like it had been forged from moonlight. It did not speak with a voice, but with thought and warmth. You have given freely, so now you shall receive. Feed them with me, but only once. Do not summon more than is needed. End of quote. Madog wept, not from fear, but from gratitude. He carried the salmon gently to its hearth and cooked it in a large pot. As the villagers came, he filled their bowls one after another, and though the pot never seemed full, it never ran dry. For 7 days it fed the poor, the widows, the lame, and even the soldiers from the king's garrison, though they bowed their heads before taking a bite. Madog kept none of it for himself. On the 8th day, a wealthy merchant passing through the town heard the tale and grew jealous. That night he crept into the hermitage and attempted to steal the remains of the salmon. The moment he touched the pot, the salmon dissolved into the steam and fire in the hearth and went out. The merchant screamed and stumbled outside, blinded by a light that was not fire, but something older. Madog found him shivering in the snow, and rather than curse him, he wrapped the man in his own cloak and led him to the river. There they knelt, and Madog prayed again, not for justice, but for mercy. The man's sight returned. The salmon was never seen again, but some say it still swims the river Conwy, appearing only when the land is truly in need. Old fishermen speak of catching a glimpse of silver just under the surface, a flash too quick, too perfect. They put away their nets and go home, for it is said, to take the salmon a second time would curse the river forever. And in the reeds by the river, just south of Conwy Bridge, there's still a low stone platform, half overgrown, where some say Brother Madog's hermitage once stood. Now, I don't know how much, if any, of that story is true, if at all. But that's not the point. If the Lord Jesus Christ proved anything by his life and example, it is that love and kindness are written and remembered. If not here in mortality, it is surely written and remembered in heaven. Go and do likewise. Next story. This is from my recent trip with a group of friends to South Dakota and Mount Rushmore. Now, I can't speak for them, but we had traveled over 1,000 miles from Salt Lake City up through Grand Teton National Park, then through Yellowstone Park to reach Mount Rushmore. I was so looking forward to seeing it again. However, when we got there, it was raining in Keystone, South Dakota on the morning of Memorial Day, 2025. Nevertheless, we all came out of the hotel room, got on the bus, and made that short drive up the mountain. As we approached the entrance to Mount Rushmore, I began to wonder. Really heavy mist. We paid the entrance fee, $100 for our group, and we drove in. We parked the bus. I kept looking through the trees where I knew it was supposed to be. Couldn't see it. It was a solid wall of white. After a few minutes, we all were off the bus and standing in the grand viewing platform and looking up into a totally impenetrable, misty fog of oblivion. We We could see nothing, not even an outline. Was it disappointing to have come all that way? Look forward to it all that time? Well, yeah. Now, I'd been hyping that moment for months in private and public conversation, and here we were, and all we could see was shifting hues of white mist. We stayed for about an hour, went through the visitor center, watched the movies. All of that was fun, fascinating, but it was not the same. A picture, not even a well-done movie, does justice to standing on the dirt and seeing the real thing. Something about that whole experience puzzled me. It just got me to thinking. I went outside and sat down in the rain at the viewing area and stared up in the direction of the Grand Monument. It was there. I knew it was there. I'd been there before, but I'd lost sight of it. And because of that lack of vision, and this is the point, I did not and could not feel the sense of awe and wonder that I had experienced there before. None of us could. We had an interesting intellectual experience, but we didn't feel anything at Mount Rushmore. Cheated by the mists. That familiar sense that I was looking at something and I was being taught by the Lord settled in, and I reflected on what was happening at that moment. I was staring up at one of the grandest symbols of America and her greatness, and I could not see it for the obscuring mists of darkness. My friends, consider that a moment. America itself was founded on just and holy principles. Principles as ancient as civilization itself. And yet, can we still see them? Can we still see, comprehend, and feel a sense of awe for those principles? Those men and women who made America great? Can we still see the glory of what they did and the principles they espoused? You know, if the fog of false principles, false teachings, and false histories cause us to lose sight of those time-tested principles of the past, we will no longer be able to see our way to power, peace, and happiness in the future. If the people that are teaching us are debunking and pointing out only the faults and failings of America's founders and of America itself, we will lose that feeling of awe for their sacrifices and of their greatness. If we lose sight of our historical greatness, we will lose the power to remain great in the future. The Almighty intended America to be a light unto the world. As He has said before, America will be as great as she is good. If we ever cease to be good as a nation, we will cease to be great. Our glory will be lost in the obscuring mists of wickedness, strife, and false principles. Last story for tonight. Coming up on June 27th is the anniversary of the martyrdom of the prophet Joseph Smith and his brother Hyrum. I felt impressed to dig deeper into this story, and so tonight I'm going to share with you the first of several stories that will follow later about the martyrdom itself. Why? Because I want you to understand that what happened to Joseph and Hyrum on June 27th, 1844 in Carthage, Illinois, was not just an act of wickedness. It was part of the plan of Almighty God for the glory and building up of the kingdom of God on earth. One of those who was there that day in the jail was John Taylor. Now, we have the account written in section 135 of the Doctrine and Covenants, but John Taylor also left this account starting on the afternoon and moments before the death of Joseph and Hyrum. He's in the jail cell. He said, I was sitting at one of the front windows of the jail when I saw a number of men with painted faces coming around the corner of the jail and aiming toward the stairs. The other brethren had seen the same. For as I went to the door, I found Brother Hyrum Smith and Dr. Richards already leaning against it. They both pressed against the door with their shoulders to prevent its being opened, as the lock and latch were comparatively useless. While in this position, the mob who had come upstairs and strove to open the door probably thought it was locked and fired a ball through the keyhole. At this, Dr. Richards and Brother Hyrum leapt back from the door. Brother Hyrum was standing right opposite to the door with his face toward it. Almost instantly, another ball passed through the panel of the door and struck Brother Hyrum on the left side of the nose and entering his face and head. Simultaneously, at the same instant, another ball from the outside entered his back, passing through his body and striking his watch. The ball came from the back through the jail window opposite the door and must, from its range, have been fired from the Carthage Greys, as the angle of the firearms shot close by the jail would have entered the ceiling, we being in the second story, and there never was a time after that Hyrum could have received the latter wound. Immediately when the balls struck him, he fell onto his back, crying as he fell, I am a dead man. He never moved afterward. I shall never forget the feeling of deep sympathy and regard manifested in the countenance of Brother Joseph as he drew nigh to Hyrum and, leaning over him, exclaimed, Oh, my poor dear Brother Hyrum. He, however, instantly arose and with a firm, quick step and determined expression of countenance approached the door and, pulling the six-shooter left by Brother Wheelock from his pocket, opened the door slightly and snapped the pistol 6 successive times. Only 3 of the barrels, however, discharged. I had in my hands a large, strong hickory stick brought there by Brother Markham and left by him, which I had seized as soon as I saw the mob approach, and while Brother Joseph was firing the pistol, I stood close behind him. As soon as he had discharged it, he stepped back, and I immediately took his place next the door, whilst he occupied the one I had done while he was shooting. Dr. Richards at this time had a knotty walking stick in his hand belonging to me and stood next to Brother Joseph a little further from the door in an oblique direction, apparently to avoid the rake of the fire from the door. The firing of Brother Joseph made our assailants pause for a moment. Very soon after, however, they pushed the door some distance open and protruded and discharged their guns into the room, when I parried them off with my stick, giving another direction to the balls. It certainly was a terrible scene. Streams of fire as thick as my arm passed by me as these men fired, and unarmed as we were, it looked like certain death. I remember feeling as though my time had come, but I do not know when in any critical position I was more calm, unruffled, and energetic, and acted with more promptness and decision. It certainly was far from pleasant to be so near the muzzles of those firearms as they belched forth their liquid flame and deadly balls while I was engaged in parrying the guns. Brother Joseph said, That's right, Brother Taylor. Parry them off as well as you can. These were the last words I ever heard him speak on earth. Every moment, the crowd at the door became more dense as they were unquestionably pressed on by those in the rear ascending the stairs until the whole entrance at the door was literally crowded with muskets and rifles, whilst with swearing, shouting, and demoniacal expressions of those outside the door and on the stairs, and the firing of guns mingled with their horrid oaths and execrations made it look like pandemonium let loose, and was indeed a fit representation of the horrid deed in which they were engaged. After parrying the guns for some time, which now protruded thicker and further into the room, and seeing no hope of escape or protection there, as we were now unarmed, it occurred to me that we might have some friends outside and that there might be some chance of escape. But here, there seemed to be none. As I expected them every moment to rush into the room, and nothing but extreme cowardice that kept them out. As the tumult and pressure increased without any other hope, I made a spring for the window, which was right in front of the jail door, where the mob was standing, and also exposed to the fire of the Carthage Greys, who were stationed some 10 or 12 yards off. The weather was hot, so we all had our coats off, and the window was raised to admit air. As I reached the window and was on the point of leaping out, I was struck by a ball from the door, about midway of my thigh, which struck the bone and flattened out almost to the size of $0.25, and then passed on through the fleshy part to within about a half an inch of the outside. I think some prominent nerve must have been severed or injured, for as soon as the ball struck me, I fell like a bird when shot, or an ox by a butcher, and lost entirely and instantaneously all power of action and locomotion. I fell onto the windowsill and cried out, "I am shot!" Not possessing any power to move, I felt myself falling outside of the window. But immediately, I fell instantly inside. From, to me at that time, an unknown cause, when I struck the floor, meaning the floor of the jail, my animation was restored, as I've sometimes seen squirrels and birds after being shot. As soon as I felt the powers of motion, I crawled under a bed which was in the corner of the room, not far from the window where I had received my wound. While on my way under the window, I was wounded in 3 other places. One ball entered a little below the left knee and never was extracted. Another entered the forepart of my left arm a little above the wrist, and passing down by the joint, it lodged in the fleshy part of my hand, and about midway in my hand and a little above the upper joint of my little finger. Another struck me on the fleshy part of the left hip and tore away the flesh as large as my hand, dashing the mangled fragments of flesh and bone against the wall, flesh and blood. My wounds were painful, and the sensation produced was as though a ball had passed through and down the whole length of my leg. It would seem immediately that after my attempt to leap out the window, Joseph also did the same thing, of which circumstance I have no knowledge, only from information. The first thing I noticed was a cry that he had leapt out the window. A cessation of firing followed. The mob rushed downstairs. Dr. Richards went to the window. Immediately afterwards, I saw the doctor going towards the jail door, as there was an iron door at the head of the stairs adjoining our door, which led into the cell for criminals. It struck me that the doctor was going in there, and I said to him, "Stop, doctor, and take me along." He proceeded to the door and opened it, then returned and dragged me along to a small cell prepared for criminals. Brother Richards was very much troubled and exclaimed, "Oh, Brother Taylor, is it possible that they have killed both Brother Hyrum and Joseph? It cannot surely be. And yet I saw them shoot them." And elevating his hands 2 or 3 times, he exclaimed, "O Lord, my God, spare thy servants." He then said, "Brother Taylor, this is a terrible event." And he dragged me further into the cell, saying, "I'm sorry, I cannot do better for you." And taking an old filthy mattress, he covered me with it and said, "That may hide you, and you may yet live to tell the tale. But I expect they will kill me in a few moments." While laying in this position, I suffered the most excruciating pain. Soon afterwards, Brother Richards came to me, informing me that the mob had precipitately fled, and at the same time confirming my worst fears. Joseph was assuredly dead. I felt a dull, lonely, sickening sensation at the news, he said, when I reflected that our noble chieftain, the prophet of the living God, had fallen, and that I had seen his brother in the cold embrace of death. It seemed as though there was an open void or vacuum in the great field of human existence to me, and a dark, gloomy chasm, blank or void in the kingdom, and that we were left alone. Oh, how lonely was that feeling! How cold, barren, and desolate. In the midst of difficulties, he, Joseph, was always the first in motion. In critical positions, his counsel was always sought. As our prophet, he approached our God and obtained for us his will. But now our prophet, our counselor, our general, our leader was gone. And amid the fiery ordeal that we then had to pass through, we were left alone without his aid. And as our future guide for things spiritual or temporal, for all things pertaining to this world or the next, he had spoken for the last time on earth. End of quote. I witness to you, Joseph Smith was a prophet of the living God, and he died a martyr. More to come later. Good night. God bless, and I will see you Sunday from Ohio.